Welcome to Money, Manifestation, and Business, the podcast that shows you how to use your energy, intention, and consciousness to reprogram your money mindset, unleash a new level of possibility, and create a life and business that lights you up. I'm your host, Jamie Berman, and I invite you to join me each week for a dose of inspiration, coaching, and teachings to help you rewrite your money story, create abundance on your terms, and grow your business in a way that's fully aligned for you. This is going to be so much fun. Let's dive in. Welcome back to the podcast. I am so excited to walk you through my absolute favorite end of year ritual, which is a wonderful ritual that I think of as kind of a closing of the year. And I know I'm putting this out before the very end of the year because I want to give you all the time to do it. And I'm actually going to include my journaling process that I created that I've been using for about the past 4 or 5 years that has allowed me to really take in and receive all the goodness that has come from the current year so that I can kind of come into completion before setting intentions for the new year, before even thinking about what's next. Because here is one of the things that I have noticed is that our brains, unmanaged, without doing these kind of rituals and intentions, always tries to think in lack, right? It always tries to think about what's next. More growth, another manifestation, more things, right? It always thinks about what's next. It tries to think about what's ahead. There's a book called The Gap and the Gain, and I actually really love this book. It's amazing. And it talks about how high achievers tend to unintentionally think about the gap. They think about how far they have to go, right? What's next? What's the next thing, right? They're always moving the goalpost and always looking at their lives through the gap or through lack, right? Versus looking at the gain, which is thinking back to how far I've come. What have I overcome? What have I created? What obstacles have I worked through? What lessons have I learned? What have I gained this year? And I think if we don't slow down and do that, it's not going to happen. And honestly, this practice of slowing down and looking at the gain is for me what has allowed me to really receive my life and receive in my life. What is the point of manifesting and growing and evolving if we're not able to receive it, right? So this end of year ritual is a practice in receiving. That's how I think of it, right? Because we're going to reflect back on this past year and you're going to write the story of this past year as if you are the hero of the story. And that's the hero of the story, no matter what has happened. No matter if you've had the most challenging year of your life, if you have hit up against the most obstacles this year, if you reached your goal or didn't reach your goal, none of that matters. And maybe it's also the highest year of your life. Maybe there was a lot of highs and it was amazing. No matter what your year was like, we get to choose the lens in which we look through. And it's so important to focus on the gains and to look for the gains in all of it. In fact, some of the most challenging years of our lives are those lives where we get the most gains because we grow the most. We gain so many lessons and new directions and new clarity through contrast, right? So I want to encourage you to slow down and do this practice before you do any kind of January 1st intention setting or thinking about the new year. Let's take in and receive everything that you've already created. Let's celebrate you. Let's look at your accomplishments and what you've done this year. Like, let's look at the progress. That's what, this gap in the gain is all about is let's look through the gain. Let's look at the progress because that creates energetically a completely different energetic state of like really reflecting and receiving your year and celebrating yourself and taking in where you are and how far you've come, what that does for you is so much on an energetic level. It's such a different energy to come from that place when you're manifesting what's next of like, holy cow, look how far I've come. And I'm so excited to evolve into the next thing versus never slowing down and actually celebrating yourself, never taking in what you've accomplished and just always looking to the next thing, because that mentality won't stop. It will always be the next thing and then the next thing. And you think you always need more. And you think that next goal is going to be the thing that makes you appreciate life or you feel abundant. And guess what? It'll never happen if you don't slow down and learn this. You have to learn how to receive. All right. So our end of year ritual is going to be all about receiving. And like I said, it's starting to look at this past year as if it was a chapter in your life. And we want to tell the story of this past year as if you're the hero of it. So you can actually download the journal. If you go to my show notes, all you have to do is put your email in and I will send you my journal. I highly recommend taking about 30, 45 minutes of some like time to yourself. You can either, go to a coffee shop or cozy up in your favorite chair and get a nice beverage, light a candle, right? Take some time to reflect on this past year and create this new ritual for yourself where you reflect before you think about what's next. And so you can download this journal and I'll just walk you through some of the questions that I'm going to ask you inside of the journal so that you can start kind of thinking about it now before you sit down to write. So here's a couple of the questions. What is it that you're most proud of yourself for this year? And again, no matter what happened, no matter if you hit your goal or not, we have to learn how to cultivate the feeling of proud. Because guess what? Life is never going to be perfect. You are never going to have hit every single goal, every single thing at the same time that we're trying to accomplish. It's not how the universe works. We're always we're always becoming, right? We're always achieving one thing here and we still have expansion in this other area. So it's always going to be 50-50, right? So let's look at within the 50-50 of life, within the human experience. What do you want to celebrate yourself for this year? What are you most proud of? And I encourage you to force yourself to find an answer. Like if I had to answer this, what would it be? Because if you're not used to celebrating yourself, it might be uncomfortable. There might be some resistance. But the truth is, you'll never get good at it unless you're willing to start practicing. And no accomplishment or no thing in form is going to bring that feeling of pride if you don't learn to practice it. So let's practice it. The next question is, what is your greatest accomplishment of this year, right? Looking at all the different things and what you've done, what you've created, what would you say your greatest accomplishment is? And what lessons have you learned, right? Reflect back and think about who you were just 1 year ago. Where were you? Think back. Sometimes I actually like to look back at my calendar and just to remind myself all the things that I did this year or what even happened this year, right? And where was I 1 year ago? I'd reflect back to that and think like, what are the lessons that I've learned this year? What do I want to take into next year, right? What are those lessons that I'm going to be able to utilize forever? What is different about you now versus 1 year ago, right? Think about that. Who were you a year ago? Where were you? What was different about you? Another one is, if this year was a chapter, what would you call it, right? What would that chapter be named? And in what ways are you more abundant now than you were 1 year ago? Again, this is one that I would encourage you to really explore and make sure that you answer, because abundance isn't just money, right? Abundance is the goodness of life, the more than enough. In what areas do you have more than enough, right? And explore how you're more abundant this year than you were 1 year ago. Okay, next one is what challenges have come up that you learned from, right? Looking at and exploring and just like really honoring yourself for any obstacles that you faced and you worked through and went through and learned from and grew through. Let's acknowledge it, right? What were your biggest challenges? Let's honor that. One of my favorite questions. If your 10-year-old self could look into the future and see where you are now, what would they think? And this is really all about being in the game, right? Being in the game of what would your 10-year-old self think of your life now and where you are and what you've created and what you've overcome. And the other one that I love answering is how will your 90-year-old self look back at this year, right? Do they have any advice for you, your 90-year-old self? What would they say to take into the new year? Now, two more questions. What story do you want to tell about this year? What is the story that you want to tell on purpose? How can you make yourself the hero of this year? It's going to make your manifestation so much easier. Let me tell you that. If you make yourself the hero of the story this year, it's going to be so much easier to think ahead when you're the hero, right? Than when you're the victim. Okay, last question is, how has this year prepared you for next, right? How has this prepared you for next? And what's next for you? So this is my end of year ritual that I always go through before setting new intentions or before doing a vision board or before thinking about what I'm moving into or before picking a word of the year. And what this does is just creates a beautiful foundation where you're really, again, able to receive in all that came from this year. Because no matter what, there's something rich that came from this year. So it's time to celebrate that. And this is a bit of a shorter episode because I want you to go into the show notes and download this and take some time to go through it, sometime between now and the end of the year. And I also want to say you can use this journal anytime you're coming into completion of something. So for example, if I have a client that's wrapping up our container, I'll have them go through this process and really reflect back on that time within the container. Or if you're wrapping up a project or a job, it can be so helpful to like do a little practice that helps you come into completion before moving on to what's next. And of course, I love doing this if you celebrate the new year. And if that tends to be the time where you do some reflection and then like some intention setting for, what's next for you, this is a great time to do it. So I would encourage you to go into the show notes and grab the journal. I will email it to you if you just put your email in and go through it. And I would actually love to hear how this process was for you. What did it feel like to write this out? You can share with me over at Instagram, @JamieBerman_. Come message me because I love to connect with you. And I would absolutely love to hear what you think of this end of year ritual that you can use not only this year, but many, many years to come. All right. Happy manifesting. Hey, thanks for listening. I hope this episode is something that you'll be able to add to your manifestation toolbox to come back to when you need a little extra motivation. If you like what you've heard today and want to take it deeper, you've got to come check out my signature coaching program, the Money Manifestation Movement. It's the place where you'll not only learn manifestation, but you'll begin to live it alongside me and an amazing community of like-minded entrepreneurs doing this work together. Head on over to jamieberman.com to learn more.